pizza, anyone?
Hello and welcome back. Today I'll be making the legendary Pizza Planet truck from the Toy Story film series. It also appears in some other Pixar films as well. I'll be using the Toyota YN86 Hilux in 1/24 scale by Aoshima as the base kit. What I'm doing here is sanding away some mould lines, and then there's quite a prominent dent in the front, so I'm using some diamond files to mark that, just to scratch the bonnet there as well. Pretty happy with that. I'll be converting this to left-hand drive, so I'm drilling the holes for left-hand drive windscreen wipers. A little pointed file like this can be useful just to clean up those holes. Now I've given it a base coat of NATO Brown from Tamiya, and then I'm going to be using the hairspray salt chipping method. So I've sprayed some cheap hairspray into this lid, and then I'm kind of dashing that on liberally and then sprinkling on some regular table salt. This will work because the salt and the hairspray are both water soluble, so if you put an acrylic top coat over that, which is also water based, and then once the paint has cured, give it a bit of a sort of a brush with a wet toothbrush or something similar like that, you should chip away at the paint, leaving the exposed brown underneath. Now here it was after 2 coats of acrylic yellow gloss from Humbrol. I've left it to cure for about 12 hours because I don't want to damage the paint that I want to keep. And here I'm using an old toothbrush and just some regular tap water and a bit of pressure, and that brushes away, leaving the rusty brown colour underneath. Looks subtle, but I'll add to this later on with a bit of weathering powder. Pretty happy with that. Then time to mask off to do the window rubbers. I'm using Tamiya tape here. I then push it down using a cotton bud, and then even further down using a toothpick, and use a nice sharp blade to cut it away. Then I use cotton bud to push it down one more time, and here I'm using Revell Anthracite Matte, because that gives it a kind of grey black look. Looks a bit older than if I just used matte black on its own. I'm going to make sure that's cured, peel it away, and I'm not too worried about it looking that presentable because obviously this is a kind of rusty beaten up car, but I still think that looks pretty good. Do the same with the door handles and of course the window trim around the sides. I printed out some of my own decals for this build. Here these are white back decals. I've got the Pizza Planet logo, which is cut into a sort of square rectangle shape, and I'm pretty happy with that. Just using a little bit of micro sol to help it adhere as best as possible. And then do another on the other side. And here it is with the headlights and the front bumper. I'll show you how I did those later. Now this kit has got lowerable suspension and adjustable camber on the front wheels, so when you're building this kind of ladder frame section here, which I've given a light coat of silver, refer to the instructions very carefully to see where it needs to be glued and where it doesn't need to be glued in order to make it adjustable. I've been careful not to paint these too much as that can stop them from being adjustable. I actually don't want this to be lowered, I want to raise up the wheels to make it look more like the car in the film. And then these parts all clip together without the need for any glue. If you did glue them, they wouldn't be adjustable. There's little brake calipers at the front, which I painted black. Now, I had some of this leftover grease from the DeLorean, also by Aoshima, so I thought I'd add some of that to make some of these moving parts a bit more manoeuvrable. This is the rear axle. Just drum brakes here instead. And this central driveshaft bit is adjustable as well. And you've got this metallic box here. I actually sprayed this with a little bit of Tamiya smoke and then weathered it up later. The clips were really useful to glue it together. And there's the suspension pretty much finished. Now for the interior. I noticed the car in the film doesn't have headrests on the seats, so I clipped those off. Be very careful because you never know where these might go. And then sanded that smooth as best as possible. That was then primed, as well as the interior. I painted that matte grey and then did the door cards in this hull red, the same as the seats. Unfortunately, the kit only comes with a right-hand drive dash, but Mark from Stoner Scale Models sent me this left-hand drive dash. He also cut it to make it narrower for the cab. I painted it matte black and then went around some of the details with hull red. I think that looks pretty good. Then added other details such as a bit of gloss clear for the radio display and some paint pens to pick out some of the dials and buttons. I drilled a hole for a key hole that I'm going to add later on. I've got these Highlight Model Studio photo etch parts for interiors. So I'm going to fit a little keyhole there and I'll see if I can add some keys later on. Pretty happy with that. Now, because I changed the dash, the decal here was a little too wide, so I cut it out and then trimmed it along the edges, and then with a little bit of micro sol, it went down quite nicely. Now for the bed at the back, the tailgate has this gap which I didn't want, so I measured a bit of flat styrene and put that into place to fill it up. I want this to be flat instead. Sanded that down and also added some putty, which I then smoothed down. I'll give that weather and a paint just like everything else. There's an inside layer that goes in here on the tailgate. And then to replicate the real one, I cut out a thin strip of styrene and put it along the top of the rear bed. Removed the stone guard from the rear section here, and then added another thin strip of styrene along the top of here and bent it round the back as well. I'll trim that off a little bit later. Now you've got two options for the inside of the tail lights, a plain chrome one or one with kind of more definition. I went with a more definition one. Used some super glue to fit that into place as it's a chrome part. You can see here that I have also done the same hairspray salt chipping on these yellow parts. Left some parts bare so that I could use the poly cement, in this case Tamiya extra thin, which is good because it gets into all of the nooks and crannies. This was a little fiddly to put together, but it wasn't that bad. Just need to be a little patient, and you could always use a bit of tape to hold some of the corners together if it kept falling apart. Pretty happy with that. You can see the rusty stone chipping there, and you can see that that just fits on top of the rear like so. Chosen not to glue it down. There's the little Yo logo on the back, supposed to be the middle of Toyota, and then I also printed out a rear handle as the real one in the film has. I used this spare one that I had in the spares box and removed the centre and built a old Toyota Hilux style steering wheel with these two spokes out of styrene. Glued that all together. and then put it back onto the central part of the original steering wheel. There's also this kind of strange handbrake here which needs to fit to the dash, and painted the steering wheel in that hull red as well. Pretty happy with that. I fashioned a small rocket keyring out of a little bit of styrene and used some Tamiya wire to fit it to one of the photo etch keys, which went into the dash like so. I think that's a nice little touch. Now I used these berry head pins to better represent the gear stick which is used in the film.
Why won't it go?
Use the wand of power.
In actual fact, the one in the kit is an automatic, whereas it's a manual in the film, so this is a good choice in my opinion. And then the interior goes together like so. I'm going to dirty this up a little bit before putting it inside. I did the same salt hairspray chipping on the bumper like so, although in this case I used silver paint. The bumper is an optional part, although it is on the car in the film. You've then got two frame parts which attach like so. And I decided to build a straight pipe exhaust out of some 2mm styrene. Drilled into the end to open it up and bent it slightly, also with a candle. Oh, I've put the bumper on upside down, I'll fix that later. And then I added a little bit of definition, first with some Tamiya black panel liner, and then with some rust weathering powder. I haven't shown it all here, but I went pretty liberally over all of this to make it look old and pretty battered. And then I put the exhaust pipe into place. You can see there how that goes together. Pretty happy so far. Then the car in the film only has the rear number plate, this one here, which says Res 1536 and 1995, which was actually the resolution that the film was made in. Rather than using the kit tyres, I borrowed these steel wheels from a Revell Golf Mark 1. I made sure to sand the VW badge off the centre, painted them black, and then used some rust weathering powder. The brake caliper needed to be removed to attach these, but then they went on quite nicely with some poly cement. Just need to be held a little while, these won't turn. There needed to be some black over fenders, so I used some curved masking tape and then some matte black paint to add those. And then the inner cab window here needed these lines done on them to show the kind of opening glass. And I just used some foam safe super glue to add that into place. And the same for the interior windows like so. I have already added the rear view mirror to the top. I chose not to attach the little aliens to it. Now this had been dechromed and then painted matte black with some iron around the headlights. I also damaged the right side one as it was in the film, and did the same salt hairspray chipping on the bumper like so, and also didn't fill in the right indicator because that is missing. Did the lower half in yellow and the grille in black, and then dirtied that up a little bit as well. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I think it looks very effective. It was time for the windscreen wipers to be added. Now it was time for the signature rocket to be added. This was 3D printed for me by Ricky. His Instagram is in the description down below. Very kind, thank you very much. I used some super glue to glue that together, and then used some putty to fill in the gap around the top. Then it was painted in semi-gloss white, and I used some matte red for the fins. The rocket does have raised lettering, but I decided it would look a lot neater if I printed out transparent decals, and I'm very happy with how this looked. I did, however, use a red paint pen for the planet in the middle. Looks a bit like Saturn, if Saturn was a pizza. And then once that had all cured, I went over it with some semi-gloss clear. Now for these pizza boxes, I found a net for them online, put the Pizza Planet logo on top and downsized them to 1/24 scale. Cut them out and used the steel ruler here to bend around the edges. And then I used a glue stick, this Pritt stick here, to glue those edges together. And I think that's pretty effective. Made a few of these, as well as a burger box and a couple of drinks cups, and I think that really adds something to the build. And you've got this "How am I driving" decal, which goes on here, needs to be at a slight angle. Now, I decided that I wasn't going to be able to adjust the rear camper section here to make it exactly like it was in the film. However, it does have a kind of humpback roof, so I added some styrene and some putty and then smoothed that down to give it a bit of an extra angle here. I wasn't too worried if it looked a bit messy, as the real one is. There's then an interior window here which goes at the end with the cab. I painted that in semi-gloss white, the same as I had done with the rocket, and then masked around these window trims to add some black paint. And that looks pretty neat. Wasn't too worried about this looking messy, as I was going to add some weathering powder to make it look dirty anyway. But I did scratch off any errors. Now for the rear window there is a masking sheet like so, and then that was painted matte black from the inside. Now the hinge here is quite challenging. I suggest you build the hinge and then glue it to the window. I used foam safe super glue, and then fit it to the internal hinge, which can be just glued in as normal. And there you can see it fitting onto the rear bed, which is a really nice fit. I redid these window decals here, as the ones I'd done before were a bit too big. You've got this KRAT FM decal, and there's a 55 with a line through it and a kind of neutral face. Then used the oil stain weathering powder here just to give it a dirty finish. Remember how important it is to look at pictures of the real subject to try and get the stains as accurate as possible when weathering. Also used the light sand on the windows, and then again used the foam safe superglue to add in these side windows. I glued in one of the pizza boxes to the interior, then added some kind of rubbish and also this little photo etch cassette tape to the interior, just to give it a sort of used look. Pretty happy with that. I had to take this out, so I was very careful with those windscreen wipers, but this clips in and out very easily with just a couple of pin points at the back and at the front. Had to be careful with the new dash as the fit wasn't exactly right, but it looks good in my opinion. I then fashioned this aerial out of another pin with an orange topper, and there was the rocket ready to go onto the roof. Just used some super glue gel for this job. That just fits there on top of those wheels. And that's nice and adjustable. And there we are, it's finished. No, it's not, because I still need to do these A-frame style wing mirrors, which featured on Hiluxes. I built the A-frame out of some thin styrene, used some heat to warm it up to melt it into shape, and then used the wing mirror lenses to go on top. And there we have it, we're finished. I really enjoyed making this. It really turned it into something unique, which not many people have in their collection. I'd looked online and I found just one other builder who'd made the same kind of conversion to an Aoshima Hilux, and I think that I've also been able to make this really stand out. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, if you'd make any differences, any changes to it, how accurate you think that this is. Let me know what you think down in the comments, what you'd like to see from me in the future. Please do like, share and subscribe, and in just a moment there'll be a recommended playlist and video that you might like to see next. Thanks a lot. I'll see you soon.